But welcome everybody. Be sure to hit the like button. Be sure to hit the subscribe button.
I remember in middle school when you felt self-conscious if you were the last one to go through puberty. That really went topsy-turvy, didn't it?
Sometimes the house barrage, it's too much explaining yourself and it's too apologetic.
Be sure to hit the notifications bell.
I actually do believe Israel won't just bomb countless civilians.
Be sure to tweet this out. Be sure to put this up on your Facebook.
You have to be kind to people. Being kind is the guy for this mess in the first place.
Put this up on your Reddit.
Chile is a country.
Be sure to cut and paste a link to this to go into your favorite Facebook chat group.
It's good to see so many normal people in here.
Now, spanking isn't just my deep, dark personal secret. It's America's deep, dark secret.
I've never seen it explained so simply anywhere.
Put this on WhatsApp. Put this on Telegram. Put this on your favorite messenger app.
Hello and welcome to the Untitled Anarchist Seagull channel. I'm your host at Untitled Anarchist Seagull called Elise. Thank you, Rotten Mouse. It has been a pretty rough day. Pretty rough day following a rather shitty night as well. But this stream I have found, even when I'm feeling pretty shitty, I end up feeling better after doing it. So I decided I gave the other one a miss. But this one I decided I'm gonna do. The other one meaning the one this afternoon. Let me just say, hats off to serial killers. They make digging a shallow grave look really easy. And I'm here to tell you it's really not. That took almost the amount of time it would have taken to do my usual afternoon stream. And the time to sort of get my nasal passage so that I could breathe afterwards, because for some reason we have to completely close, somehow our bodies are rigged so that they close off our nasal passages when we cry, and they really need to patch that, I think, in the next release, because that's unnecessary. Seriously, that's overkill. Anyway, yeah, so I'm gonna try to keep it somewhat lighter just because it's been a day of suck. So let's see, we've got all sorts of interesting crap to look at, and let me just say, if you ever think of getting a parrot, and I recommend, they're a lot of work. Establishing a rapport with them is complicated. They're very particular creatures, and they have a whole lot of personality despite how small they are. But let me just say, they are also very delicate. We don't know exactly what happened. It was just very sudden. And the thing about parrots is they're very good at masking when something's wrong. It's a protective feature that they have to help avoid attracting predators. But of course it also means that if there's something wrong, you basically don't see any sign of it until it's really and truly wrong. And the soil is full of rocks and shit, and it was actually quite hard. Yeah, it was rough, but we got it done. I think it's a sweet little memorial. Yeah, and I was thinking, actually, this week from hell, all the fucked up shit going on, had me thinking about Andor, actually, and just, hey, River Rune, and just how much that show got right. It still amazes me that it got made. It got so many things right. Because there's one thing that really I keep thinking about lately, which is, have you all seen Andor, chat? If you haven't, even if you're not a Star Wars person, it's one you can get into even if even if Star Wars isn't your thing, I'm not a huge Star Wars person myself, but it is just so fucking well done. But, okay, so at one point, there's this, a scene where they're bringing this suspected, like, rebel person in for interrogation, the Empire is, and the way that they announce that their, like, ultimate method of torture is essentially having people listen to a recording of the last moments of a planet that the Empire genocided. Oh, I never saw Mandalorian, but I mean, Andor's worth it. Andor's worth it specifically because it's like, it's not... It is more... I mean, it is within the Star Wars universe, but it is really about how people end up deciding to join a resistance against imperialist pricks. And it's really just beautifully done. But, I mean, I was thinking about that because we're sort of bombarded with horror. I mean, coming out of Gaza, and now Lebanon too, for fuck's sake. And in that context, that can be extreme. If all you're seeing is the absolute just horrible shit that the US and Israel are doing to Lebanon and Palestine. Aw, thank you, River Rune. That can get really overwhelming, and that can lead to, like, passivity and inaction. Because you just get overwhelmed by the just awfulness of it all. And that is why I would just highly recommend, like, paying attention also to the footage the Resistance puts out. That is kind of an antidote to that, and it is the energy that we all need to find in order to try to make this thing stop. I mean, those Resistance fighters are just absolutely incredible with all the shit they're dealing with, and yeah, they just don't stop. Like, if you don't watch, like, John Elmer's Resistance report on the Electronic Intifada livestream, definitely check it out. I mean, because it helps, I find, in terms of, like, staying centered and being able to find the energy to try to do something about all this. If you also see that actually, oh yeah, we're none of, I don't think any of us is really doing enough. I think we all really need to sort of bring up our game in all sorts of ways. I mean, we all have like limits to what we can individually do, but that's why it's important to, I think, have a culture of saying that everybody's work is important, that, you know, as Bobby Sands said, you know, everybody has their own particular role to play, and work from there. You know, there's some people who can do some things that other people can't, and they're, you know, it's and the people who can't do those things, they can probably do other things, and as long as we're all, you know, doing the most of those things that we can, and constantly looking for more things that we could do that we haven't thought of before, I think that is potentially moving in the right direction. Yeah, I mean, be very careful about, like, talking about things in public channels, let me just say. I mean, that's why if you don't have Signal, get Signal. Learn the security features, learn about the auto-deleting messages and all that stuff. Because there's some things that you can talk about publicly, if you talk about them, you know, broad, vague terms, like I'm doing right now, and there are things that are probably best kept to a relatively small number of people, and it's very much a matter of judgment to understand which is which, but it does of course complicate things. like with the cracking down on Samidun, for example, which I had first misread it as it having been banned in the US and Canada. It turns out, in the US anyway, I'm not sure the exact situation in Canada, it's not outright banned. And that's important. There's like some sort of bullshit sanctioning, because Israel claims, without providing any evidence, that they are funding the armed resistance. But I mean, one really key thing there to know is this is all about intimidating people in order to stop them speaking in favor of the resistance. That's why they're doing this. Like Samidun, they're a prisoners' solidarity organization, and even the State Department has cited their reports on the situations of Palestinians being held hostage by Israel. I mean, so, like, one thing that is definitely worth doing is to simply refuse to be intimidated by those sorts of tactics. I mean, Telegram is not a particularly secure channel, especially since the CEO got indicted. But Signal's quite good. And there's a Signal desktop client that works an absolute treat. I would highly recommend that for secure communications. Of course, so let's see what kind of shit I've got. Let's see. There was an interesting video, actually, on the subject of resistance and stuff. Not so much like, not so much one of dunking on jabronis, though I have some jabronis to dunk on. I got some. I think I've got some primo material here for that. But Greg Stoker, who we started to watch him on Majority Report, like towards the very end of the stream, and he started to be saying, he was like assessing the state of the Israeli army from his own experience as a former Army Ranger turned anti-war activist and stuff, and he has very interesting things to say on the subject. And this is him talking with John Elmer of the EI Resistance Report. Oh, there is a way to shut down Windows Recall. Hang on a second. I'm gonna drop this. I'm gonna drop this in chat. There is a PowerShell command that shuts down Windows Recall. I'm on Windows 10, so I don't have to worry about that shit. But hang on. Just gonna drop this in chat. So, apparently what you do is you open PowerShell in admin mode, and then you type in that bit right after the word mode, and that will shut down, that's supposed to shut down the recall feature. But anyway, so one option is Greg Stoker and John Elmer talking about the resistance and the epic incompetence of the Israeli army. I mean, in that case, the jabronis are the Israeli army, and we're just sort of all kind of dunking on them at that point. We've also got Loserbox, why I'm obsessed with Hassan's bad takes. Not sure what the bad takes are, but it's Loserbox calling them bad takes, so your mileage may vary a little bit. We've got Pim Tool, Super Gang seizes for San Antonio apartment complex. Society collapsing. Seriously, look at it. Look on your screen. It says collapsing. Society is collapsing. I'm not sure what that means. We got Caleb Muppet, our favorite Mooney Nazbol hybrid, PragerU blames woke on Mao. We've another one from the Muppet. Why does the U.S. government target Caleb Muppet? And then Ben Shapiro reacts to Halloween TikToks. And another Ben Shapiro with the white supremacist Douglas Murray. Why American isolation does not work. Are you serious, Rotten Mouse? Is that an actual thing? Like, spelling mistakes to drive engagement? Only Linux I've ever really worked with is Kali, and not much there. But, okay, so anything in particular strike anyone's fancy? I say, fuck it. We're gonna start with Ben Shapiro reacting to Halloween TikToks. Why the fuck not? That should bring joy to all of us. Mr. Helium. Oh shit, it's the ghost of Ben Shapiro's relevance.
Boom! It's time for my producers to scare me with some terrible Halloween TikToks. I cannot wait to see. I can't wait.
He is so uncommitted to this bit.
See, but I guess I can't wait to see what horrors they have in store. This video is sponsored by Burnout.
Okay, well done. Okay, at some point he has to get on his bullshit here. Is it just going to be him laughing at Halloween TikToks? Is that all this is going to be? Please tell me this. If it's not, we're going to give it a couple of minutes. If it's just Ben Shapiro acting relatively normal.
It's actually really funny, Frank. I like that one. I like that one.
Now we all get to feel a little bit slimy because Ben Shapiro likes a thing that other people also like.
Hello?
Is this all it's gonna be? I mean, first, apart from everything else, the scariest thing in this shit so far has been his little laugh.
What is happening?
God, okay, that laugh gets faker every time he does it.
Okay, so that is pretty good. Also, I used to actually do this with my actual live child, our first baby. I would do a game we called Secret Baby, where I knew my wife would open the towel closet, for example. And so, like, 1 second before she got there, I'd put the baby in there, obviously.
Okay, what?
To sure the baby was safe, and then she would open up the baby.
See, I told you he was going to have to say something fucked up. Like, so he's just sort of, like, dropping his actual live baby in enclosed spaces in order to freak out his wife, like normal, like as you do.
What did you say? but it was just cute.
This is totally not going to be something discussed with a therapist in a few years' time.
Other than scary, because, cute baby.
If you are hungry, and a spooky ghost will give you candy. Spooky candy. Ew.
Oh, this is adorable.
No trick-or-treaters right now, honey. We just had...
He looks visibly in pain at watching this. What's going on?
Wait.
You tripping, bro.
Sorry.
And kids like in The Sixth Sense. Turns out they're just dead people everywhere, and he's offering them candy.
A spooky ghost will give you candy.
Oh, you're scaring me.
Oh, God.
Oh, so he's going to try to...
You okay, Luke?
The dad was reassuring the banana that he was just a stuffed guy with a bowl of candy.
Wait, what? How do you reassure a banana? Is this AI slop? What does it mean to reassure a fucking banana? Oh, okay, that sort of banana.
The dad got more scared than the banana.
Okay, it makes a lot more sense when you know that the banana isn't an actual banana.
Don't do that to kids.
Okay. I'm thinking maybe switch over to something else. I somehow expected this was going to be something a bit different. So we're going to see Loserbox's obsession with Hassan's bad takes. Can't wait to find out what he thinks Hassan's bad takes are. Like, I don't watch Hassan really, but every time one of these dickheads decides to, like, have a go at him, it's over him saying the most, like, just basic, obvious thing. Like, not even seriously controversial amongst people who think facts matter.
Every time someone asks if I've talked about the Hassan stuff already, I'm just going to wait a bit longer. Okay, that's what I'm going to do. You don't deserve that Learnabox's subreddit is claiming that he was banned for being anti-Islam. Oh, Asmongold. Learnabox's subreddit is claiming Asmongold was banned for being anti-Islam. It's ridiculous. The guy...
Wait, what?
Endorsed the genocide of Palestinians. I'm not editorializing with genocide. That's the term he used, and he meant genocide. He said he didn't...
Well, yeah, and it is, like, literally what's going on. Oh, lots of people with... Let's see... Oh, lots of, like, Akiva Merkava. Like, just naming yourself after the tanks that Israel's running out of?
Didn't care. It's also, I don't even get it. It's like, it's not mutually exclusive. Like, you can be, he was being anti-Islam and also being kind of ambivalent about there being a genocide. He said he didn't.
Oh, I mean, yeah. In fact, I think you'll find a lot of the most, like, a lot of the most, like, demonstratively, like, anti-Islam people are also on team, let's pretend there's no genocide.
Didn't care, yeah. Which is really bad. I even said that anyway. Fuck. Whatever. Speaking of bad faith mischaracterizations.
Since we are on the Loser Box Variety Hour.
Tendency. Hassan has decided to call me out. Kind of. Oh no.
Hassan calls out Lonerbox, says he's lost sight of honesty by orbiting around Destiny. Yeah, I mean, that would be the effect of orbiting around Destiny.
It's always prompted by the same thing, you understand? Can you guess what? Can you guess what prompted this call out?
Probably that you had a shitty take that was similar to a shitty take that Destiny had, and he is giving you the benefit of the doubt and suggesting that you might have a better take if you weren't so completely up Destiny's ass. Like, he's basically Destiny's Xander Hall at this point. So Destiny really ought to watch his back in the end, because, yeah, I mean, Xander Hall's never... They're not forever minions.
Loner Box tried to disprove your material condition by pulling up a map of...
Chemical Mind? No, no, that's not a name that rings a bell to me.
The LGBT Equality Index and a map of GDP per capita, which line up almost perfectly, but then pointed to the GDP of Gulf states and Russia to say material conditions are good there, and is still homophobic.
Interesting. So they actually watched the stream. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, hate watching is a thing that people do.
What is this argument?
What is this layout, incidentally? This is really confusing. He and Hassan are on the same corner of the fucking screen. Like, I mean, what kind of graphic design is this?
Dude. Like, why?
Yeah, what is this
Why
argument?
is Loner Box trying to be like defend Asmongold? What a fucking take.
Okay, Chad, help me out here. Anyone heard of Asmongold? This name I've never heard.
It's interesting that disagreeing with Hassan is automatic defense of Asmongold. There's only one side or another. That's interesting. Okay. If you don't agree with my incredibly reductive, shit for brains, dogmatic view on homophobia in the world, it must be because you defend Asmongold. For the record, how many times yesterday did I say to the... I said Asmongold...
Who, okay, who the hell is Asmongold? I've got to look this guy up now, apparently we're going to be talking a lot about him. How content creation breaks people's brains is a link that comes up when I look up Asmongold. Asmongold issues surprising statement after his Twitch ban. This week he was banned from Twitch for a heated rant regarding the war in Gaza, in which he deemed them an inferior culture and said he did not empathize with this tremendous amount of civilian deaths in the country. Yeah, okay, so Asmongold's a piece of shit is what I'm getting. This is giving piece of shit. Okay. Asmongold issued a full apology video shortly after, which was itself surprising, as oftentimes large-scale figures with right-leaning audiences and views simply push past these things. Well, they push past these things, of course, because a lot of the time TOS doesn't exist for guys like that. So they push past it because of that. That's a link to the article I was just looking at.
Was reprehensible in what he said and that he deserved his ban. That's what I actually said. I didn't defend Asmongold anyway.
I don't know whether that's true or not. I have absolutely no idea. I try to watch as little of these jabronis as possible. Basically, the times you're seeing me watch these on stream are the only times I watch them. Unless somebody else is dunking on them. If like Thought Slime and the Serfs get together and dunk on them, then I watch that. But other than that,
what the fuck?
My recommendations are already toxic as fuck as it is.
Are we going to get any engagement? Oh, by the way, sorry. Sorry. Without remembering what he said after this, because I think this was as far as I got. Hassan doesn't actually think I'm defending Asmongold's take. Just so you guys understand that. He doesn't actually think I support Asmongold in his take about Palestinians.
Well, I mean, you have been kind of doing propaganda interference for Israel a fair bit. So I can see why somebody might think that you and Asmongold have certain things in common, and you are orbiting around Destiny, and Destiny's a racist piece of shit. So you can see where somebody might get that. I don't know what remarks this is about. I have no idea. I only just heard of Asmongold. But I can see where somebody would get that.
When you say that. The actual thing with Hassan here is that he realizes that someone who I think he has
weil mein Papagei gestorben ist.
Respected the opinions of, at least in the past, disagrees with him on something and has challenged one of his positions, and Hassan is too insecure about his intelligence to actually look into what I'm actually saying.
Well, what are you actually saying then?
So,
go on, what are you actually saying? Let's hear your wonderful high-level take that Hassan is apparently too insecure to understand.
Thinking, what's the quickest way I can neutralize this threat to my perceived intelligence? Well, just say he's defending Asmongold. Oh, there we go, damn, defending the genocider. Got him. That's it. It is very intense.
I mean, okay, this is actually kind of wild, because Loserbox defends Israel, okay? But he apparently draws the line at being perceived to be defending an asshole who just got banned from Twitch? Like, priorities, dude. You're gonna defend a genocidal regime, but you're not gonna... But you're gonna, like, get offended if somebody suggests that you defended a defender of that regime.
No. He does not actually think I defend Asmongold's sake. He is cleverer than that. And he's also clever enough to know that he's too stupid to actually contend with what I'm saying. So.
Oh, wow. Okay, now we really need to know what you're saying, though. What are you saying, Loserbox?
That's why he's not going to check. He's just going to go with that characterization by that chatter.
Like, I thought this guy was, like, somewhat normal. What has happened?
What has happened?
Yes, brother, you're right. There is spiritually something wrong with Muslim countries and Russia.
I also, again, if he'd bothered to check the source of that claim, he would know that I said the complete opposite of that. That I said that there's nothing in essential or in the DNA of Arabs and Muslims that makes their culture so homophobic. I even acknowledged that throughout history, there have been times when the Arab and Muslim world was more societally advanced in terms of...
I mean, like, for example, right now, there's this very interesting contrast we've got going between the US, Israel, Germany, and Britain, whose target selection, whose preferred targets right now we're seeing are residential tower blocks, hospitals, UN bomb shelters, schools, libraries, universities, irreplaceable World Heritage sites, one of the fourth oldest fucking Catholic church on the planet, and huge numbers of defenseless people. And then you've got on the other side, you've got, the resistance axis, you've got the Palestinian resistance, you've got Hezbollah, you've got Iran, you've got the Iraqi resistance, you've got Yemen. And who are they targeting? Well, let's see, army bases, air force bases, the headquarters of the Israeli intelligence service, and military units. I mean, so I would say, at least, yeah, I mean, without really buying into too much of the idea of, like, who's advanced or not, but I would have to say, like, in terms of showing some sort of, restraint and human decency in the conduct of hostilities, clearly it isn't the US, Israel, Britain, and Germany showing the restraint and human decency in the conduct of hostilities. Very clearly, it's the people who we are supposed to think of as Marvel villains who are systematically showing exactly the sort of restraint that we are like raised and inculcated with the idea that us, the good guys, would have.
Not just views on minorities and everything else and treatment of minorities, but also more technologically advanced and intellectually advanced than the Christian world. Did that mean there was something spiritual along with the Christian world? No, it's because...
I mean, there are... First of all, like, the Christian world is not entirely a great term to begin with. I mean, like, all these terms, when you put, like, the blank world, not great. Because there are lots of differences. There is a huge difference, for example, between the white Christianity of Europe and, say, Christianity as it's practiced in, like, you know, in the old, like, Middle Eastern and African Christian communities that existed, that were not the result of colonization, that existed well before Europe was in any position to colonize anybody. It's you know, they got a different approach to things because these things are historically determined. Like, I mean, societies create their own approach to religion, and it has a lot to do with what those societies are getting up to and what they're facing and doing and stuff. So, I mean, the Christian world also doesn't really work, just to be clear. I was going to just say, yeah, actually, the Christian world seems kind of fucked up. But, I mean, really what we're talking about is the European Christian world. Bonsoir.
At the end of the day,
Danke
societies are shaped by a large combination, by a network of different influences, whether it's geography or environment, or it can even be down to like the weather in a lot of ways about shaping these cultures. And it can also be because of wars or geopolitics, or even just accidents. Even just like one leader can just go fucking mental, and that can shape the course of history in a lot of ways. There are lots
Although
of
usually, see, I mean, the thing is, it's very rarely one leader. Very few things are down to one leader just losing his shit. Usually there has to be an entire ruling class that is at the very least willing to tolerate it or considers it in their interest to let that happen.
reasons. As for the Middle East, I think it's very easy to explain how there are multiple variables, whether it's the drawing up of the borders post that region coming on the wrong end of the Ottoman Empire, the way that those borders were drawn very arbitrarily and by...
Wait, is he going to skip over the British and French empires? Is that what he's doing here? We're just going to talk about the Ottoman Empire and not Britain and France?
Like people who didn't really have the interests of the
Italy.
people in the region in mind. The fact that there were power grabs made by different factions, by different monarchs. Like the fact that you had the Hashemites and the Ibn Saud family basically trying to take control over the Hijaz and those regions. You had like the opportunistic power grabs in Syria by Faisal, but then he got kicked out of Syria, and then he was installed in Iraq, and then he by the British Empire, and then he's overthrown in Iraq.
Oh wow, he acknowledges that there is a British Empire.
By a local leader who ends up supporting the Nazis. Like, yeah, it's complicated, okay? There's a lot of reasons, and unfortunately a lot
And I mean, it's worth noting, colonized anti-colonial movements in World War II, there were a lot of divisions within them, because a lot of them were looking at one point, a lot of them very early on sort of said, okay, whatever bad for the people colonizing us is probably good for us. So you had like anti-colonial leaders in India and a number of places who were seeing, in the first couple of years of World War II, seeing Germany riding high, thinking, okay, this is probably going to be it. This is going to be the end of our colonization. This is how they lose. And, so they kind of made overtures until eventually Hitler actually very clearly said some things that made it clear this was not going to work for them. He did not have any desire to see them decolonized and governing themselves in any way. And aside from that, then he also was very clearly starting to lose the war, and so they sort of drifted away from that. But that is actually that is a thing in the history of like the African and Asian colonies, and actually also including Ireland. There were some people in like the IRA who figured Germany's trying to fuck up Britain, that might be good for us. And some of them actually went and tried to support that, or at the very least tried to sort of win German support for what they were doing.
Or the Middle East has not really had enough time.
And also, another example of that is the Zionist movement, including the specific right-wing factions that ultimately gave us the Likud party, like the Stern Gang, who offered to enter the war on Germany's side if Hitler would just grant them a Nazi protectorate for Jews in Palestine.
To shake off
Hitler never returned their call.
Of those old inherited feudal tendencies of the Ottoman Empire, and that's why a lot of these countries are still very socially regressive. That's why.
I wonder if there's another empire that's also been very systematically supporting reactionary forces in the region, Loserbox. Like, who took over? Okay, so the Ottomans, we had the Ottomans, and you kind of mentioned the Brits for about 5 seconds there, but not really. But after the British Empire kind of collapsed after World War II, who took over? Who's been, propping up the House of Saud and all these family dictatorships in the Gulf? Who is that again? Remind me, Loserbox? Oh, that's the U.S., right. That's why we're not hearing about it.
A lot of them are still very authoritarian. That's why a lot of them are bad on women's rights. It's not as simple, however, like Hassan might mention, as it's just because of material conditions. It's just because they're poor or because of Western bombs. That is a very...
Well, let's just note that the Western bombs tend to target certain factions and not others. And it's hard not to notice that, the most pluralistic society in the region, Lebanon, is right now being just utterly massacred by the U.S. and Israel. The U.S. is very actively participating in that. And the U.S. has openly said that the reason they're kind of cool with massacring Lebanon is that they'd really like to install a president who would act in the U.S. interest. See, they've had deadlock in the parliament for a while because there's the pro-U.S. faction and the faction that is more for political independence and doesn't particularly want the U.S. and includes Hezbollah and various other parties. Neither of them has an outright majority, so they can't get a president in. And the U.S. wants to take advantage of that.
Brain dead, reductive way to look at it. And again, this is the map I'm referring to, by the way. The ones that apparently match up perfectly. Speaking of reductive ways of looking at things, Loserbox clearly doesn't know what material conditions are. I mean, let me say, I haven't heard Hassan explain what he's using it, but it's more than, fucking GDP per capita. Really? You think these maps match up almost perfectly? Again, they match up almost perfectly if you're not interested in any other variable apart from, material conditions and...
Except this isn't material conditions, this is GDP per capita. That's not the same thing. This is, if you look at his Our World in Data, that's that chart on the right, and you look in the URL, it says, this is GDP per capita. That isn't the material conditions. That is one indicator, and not even a particularly good indicator for how the state in which the majority of the population are living.
America bad, but
America bad though. Motherfucker, you don't get to mock people who point out the harm the U.S. is doing and act, as if America good is some sort of indisputable default position. If you want to make the argument that America good in this particular moment in history, go ahead. I want to see you make that argument. Show us why America good right now.
look, for example, the thing I said about Russia. Russia is, in terms of wealth, a lot better off than anywhere in Africa, especially Central Africa. But in terms of gay rights, it's actually almost just as bad as some of these places. It's worse than some. It's worse than some of the southern ones. Doesn't also mention that Latin America, these gay countries like Bolivia.
Yeah, and again, oh, interesting. There's no data for Cuba, which actually has is actually very good on LGBT rights. Cuba, it's worth noting, is in a really bad shape at the moment because the Biden administration has been really turning the screws on the sanctions. They're refusing to take them off the bullshit list of state sponsors of terrorism and shit. And it is really causing them serious problems right now.
Not great for GDP per capita and all that, but for gay rights, like far better than anywhere in these areas. China does very well economically, okay, but not very good on gay rights. It's not very, like, there's just because there's some correlation, and even here in the Islamic world, you've got like a lot of very poor performing areas in Central Africa.
Poor performing, like he's literally just does not understand what material conditions means. Like, material conditions includes colonization. It includes the fact that a lot of these places in Africa did not have these sort of reactionary views on gender and sexuality until colonial powers and fucking Christian missionaries showed up and imposed them on people. Like, you want to talk about, like, you know, there occasionally, you don't hear much about it right now, but like the, you know, execute the gays law in Uganda. That is, I mean, that campaign for that was heavily funded by right-wing groups in the US. The same groups that actually fund TERFs in Britain and Ireland and, like, bankrolled the campaign to keep abortion illegal under the Constitution. Those are material conditions too, Loserbox.
Economically and in terms of gay rights, but it seems like improved living standards for the locals, especially for like Emirati locals and Saudi locals, or people in Oman and all these like...
Okay, and remind me again who props up the family dictatorship in Saudi Arabia? Who sends them all the weapons that they need in order to maintain their rule over the population, and a few extra for a while so that they could try to genocide Yemen? Who was that again?
Stable, like much more stable, oil-rich Gulf states. They are about as bad as the really poor ones. Yeah, it's a bit more complex than just fucking American bombs and material conditions.
I mean, actually, those two things... First of all, American bombs are not separate from material conditions. And... yeah, this is not really making your case there.
Yes, that is a very, very easy claim to make. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, not as easy as a claim that material conditions just means GDP per capita. Like, maybe look up the term. I mean, I don't really watch Hassan, so I am not sticking my hand in the fire for his own understanding of the concept of material conditions, but I have a feeling it is more sophisticated than this bullshit.
Okay. Also, material conditions in Russia being good is funny, but you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good thing I never said they were great. It's just that they're better than a lot of countries that
well, based on what except what is, again, it's not just GDP per capita. That's not what. If that's what material conditions meant, I mean, this is a term that comes from Marx. We're talking about, you know, historical materialism and dialectical materialism here. And if what Marx meant by that was GDP per capita, maybe he would have just fucking said that. Like, this is... Actually, maybe look that up before you start talking, my dude.
About the same performance on queer rights, yes. That's actually quite valid. It's quite a valid take, Hassan. Sorry. It's not even to mention the stuff that Hassan was saying about the Middle East was so stupid. Trying to say that like people in Gaza, like Hamas, have homophobic tendencies and culturally regressive tendencies just because they don't have the breathing space allowed to them because they're too busy getting bombed by Americans. But
well, yeah, but that does have an effect. That does have an effect. I mean, you can't really deny that that's going to play a role in it, because the thing is, they're constantly having to deal with just bare survival.
Even that, if you look at like the Middle East, that's even Middle Eastern tendencies on homosexuality and other like cultural progressive things is still it's not that simple at all. So.
Well, I mean, what he's doing, it's so cool, because what he's doing is first he hyper simplifies what Hassan is saying by turning material conditions into GDP per capita and U.S. imperialism, the role of U.S. imperialism, into just like bombs. And then he says it's not that simple. Dude, welcome to the conversation. Everybody who's talking about it in these terms knows it's not that simple.
Hooray.
Bonsoir, Adria.
Today. Let's all go down to see the straw man of you he made from what his chatters say.
Thanks for the $49.99. That's incredibly generous, Dickler. Oh god.
Yeah. $49.99 to say that.
Okay. Anyway, like if you look at some of these regions, you can just go through it. Okay. Again, like. You can.
He's so proud of his GDP per capita take. He's gonna just go name all of the countries now.
You can go through some of these areas, and to try and reduce all of this to colonialism and wealth, it doesn't really mention the fact that in a lot of these cases,
material conditions doesn't just mean wealth.
Like when it came to Saudi Arabia, pretty well off in terms of their local population, but not very good on. I think his answer.
That's not the case that I would bring up if I were trying to refute the role of colonialism in pushing reactionary ideas about gender and sexuality.
So this was that. This is because they've got Western-backed dictators.
Well, they do.
Western-backed dictators are the reason that Saudi Arabia is like regressive on. Sexuality.
You're saying it's not? Are you trying to say that if the U.S. were to cut off the House of Saud tomorrow and they collapsed, and people were able to completely reorganize the society along something other than an absolutist family dictatorship that exists solely for the enrichment of the House of Saud, I think probably you'd find different views being taken. I think it's a bit of a bold statement to say that everything would stay the same if this massive outside influence on the society, on the state, on the culture, on the economy were suddenly lifted. I think that's a pretty bold statement to be making. I mean, it is inherently speculative. It's inherently speculative to say it would improve as well, because it's talking about a thing that hasn't happened yet, and so there is speculation involved in it. But the thing is, to say that has absolutely no effect?
As if, are we really suggesting that local Saudis and Emiratis are yearning for fucking gay rights? Like,
well, I would imagine the queer ones probably are.
Just because of their leaders? Actually, no, that's not true. These countries in the Gulf states were, particularly Emirates, Saudi, and Oman, these countries were actually the ones that came out of the Arab Spring fairly well.
Well, yes, isn't that interesting how the countries that came out of the Arab Spring very well are the that's not... Okay, what he's saying here... This makes it sound like, there were no uprisings. There were attempts in Saudi Arabia. There were attempts in the Gulf dictatorships. There was a big one in Bahrain, and the U.S.-backed dictatorships massively cracked down on them and just completely shut it down. So, not a great example there. I mean, he's trying to say that because they successfully suppressed rebellions in Saudi Arabia, that therefore the regime is popular. By that definition, like, Hamas must be very popular with the Gaza division because Hamas successfully defeated the Gaza division. So, I mean, if that's the measure of, like, popularity...
The Arab Spring took off largely in places like Egypt and Libya and places that were actually led by secularists, even in places that were more anti-Western. Assad was anti-Western, okay? But the Arab Spring...
Actually, I mean, Assad was sort of ambivalent. It was more like the West was anti-Assad. Like, I mean, he actually tried to work with the West on some things, on some, like, not very good things. Like, he would occasionally torture people the West wanted tortured. That, I mean, that's a thing. Maher Arar, for example, Canadian, Syrian dual citizen, the U.S. sent him, deported him to Syria so that he could be tortured, even though he was, like, a recognized refugee and stuff like that. But, I mean, it is way more complicated than that. Because it's more the West's attitude towards these states that, you know, this sort of representatives of Arab republicanism, which in itself is already kind of, its existence is something of a challenge to U.S. rule, even though they are actually, like, I mean, Gaddafi was very willing towards the end to work with the U.S. on all sorts of neoliberal shit. One of his closest associates, you can find plenty of pictures of him being photographed with Tony Blair and stuff like that. Like, so to just say they're anti-U.S. Does not really fit. The U.S. was definitely anti-them.
Still facing the fucking repercussions over there, right? Because there's still a civil war happening. And Assad was not pro-Western. He was put on the axis of evil by George Bush.
Wait, he was put on the axis of evil. Actually, he was not on the axis of evil. But what is true there, what he's, like, almost remembering, is that after the U.S. invaded Iraq, huge numbers of Iraqis were fleeing the country to get away from the massacres that the U.S. was carrying out. And Syria opened their borders to Iraqi refugees. And Bush was not happy with that, and he threatened to expand the war to attack Syria if they didn't stop letting in Iraqi refugees.
He was an Iran-backed figure. What about Lebanon? Lebanon gets bombed by Israel all the fucking time. They've had like 4 invasions. They've been caught in between the imperial interests of America, of Iran, of Syria, of the French at one point. They've been caught in between all the bullshit, not to mention internal sectarian violence, like civil wars, like incredibly bloody civil wars. But you know, in Beirut, in the north and the east, that's where you've got your Beirut Pride, where you have gay clubs and gay events.
Yeah, you see, and again, he is doing a great job of refuting the oversimplification he made up in the first place.
Every year. So, but you compare that to somewhere like the Emirates or Saudi, which don't...
Yeah, and isn't it interesting to note that when he's listing countries that are really bad on LGBT rights, they're countries the U.S. and Israel actually get along very well with.
Don't get bombed by Israel and do actually have a lot more breathing space, and you don't have gay pride events every
Well, I mean, the breathing space, unless you count the fact that they are ruled by U.S. puppets.
So it's very reductive. It's very reductive to suggest.
Yeah, this reductive straw man that you just created really is reductive. You did a great job of refuting your own idea of what material conditions and the role of imperialism are there. A really good job. You created an oversimplification and you pointed out why you never should have.
What he was suggesting yesterday with Asmongold about American and Israeli bombs and the material conditions. Also, material conditions in Lebanon are quite shit. Their economy's been fucked for ages. They've barely had a functioning government for most of the last 20 years. They were occupied by Syria for 29 years. They were occupied by Israel in the south for 18 years.
Again, material conditions is not something that is just good or bad. It has to do with things also about how the society is organized, how the economy is organized, who lives in the society, who else lives in the society. There are, like, I mean, he's calling things reductive while he's reducing material conditions to something that is either GDP per capita or can just be called good or bad.
Years. They've had one of the worst inflation crises in the entire world. People can't even get into their bank accounts for extended periods. But they have actually made progress in some parts of the country on gay rights.
Yeah, I mean, see, and they just happen to be one of the countries that the U.S. and Israel are not very keen on. And also aren't very keen on the U.S. and Israel. I mean, there are segments of the society in Lebanon who are very much pro-U.S. and pro-Israel and fascist. It's worth noting. And if they ever ended up in control again, chances are, the state of LGBT rights would actually seriously deteriorate. I mean, along with the state of a lot of things. But, I mean, it's not the U.S. bombs somebody and therefore... Nobody's saying the U.S. bombs somebody and therefore people start saying, wow, maybe we should go hate queers. That's not what anyone is seriously claiming.
So it's like... it's complicated, okay?
Yeah, no shit. It is way more complicated than what you just said.
Also, by the way, it's reductive to put it all down to to Islam as well, because although the Islamic world right now is very culturally regressive and is authoritarian, etc., it's also that was never.
I mean, the U.S. is also extremely culturally regressive at this point, and is quite fucking authoritarian. Increasingly so. I mean, and a lot of people act like this is like the threat of authoritarianism is essentially entirely like Trump and the people around him, but it has been an ongoing process. Really, I mean, you can see beginnings of it in the 80s and 90s, but it really accelerated after 9/11, and it has not moved back.
Case compared to the rest of the world. The Islamic world used to be more advanced on inclusion of minorities than the rest of the world for quite a while.
And what you're talking about here, what you're proving here, Loserbox, is actually why the Islamic world isn't a really useful analytical term. Because you're basically trying to act as if every country that is has a Muslim majority is somehow inherently part of some sort of monolith. I mean, you started saying like the Christian world, and that doesn't really work very well either. But, I mean, there are all sorts of different cultures, and all sorts of different approaches to the fucking religion, too, you know. Like, none of this... You don't get to call people reductive and then start talking about the Muslim world.
Just saying. That's all I'm saying, okay?
Well, yeah, what you're saying was shit, though.
And maybe that's what Hassan doesn't want to contend with, because you can't sum it up into a dogmatic soundbite as you're trying to...
Is that what he was doing? It sounded like that's what you were doing.
Re-radicalize your friend, or radicalize your fucking 14-year-old dipshit audience. So yeah, it's alright.
Whereas... Loserbox's 14-year-old dipshit audience is really impressed by hearing about how Loserbox's own strawmans are reductive, according to Loserbox.
Israel could target a wide array of targets in Iran, including missile and drone storage sites, military bases, key government buildings, and nuclear research laboratories. Two Israeli...
Oh, now I understand why this layout sucks so badly. It's because it is just Loserbox's head on top of Hassan's chat.
Officials briefed on the plans told the New York Times. Nice. Well, I mentioned Lonerbox. I don't fucking know. I don't know how. No, bro, his brain broke over his hate for you. I didn't even know he hated me. Like, I've talked to him before. I think he's just more so like a Destiny orbiter.
Oh, I don't hate him. I just dislike him massively because of his fucking conduct in the last year.
Well, motherfucker, you went on a propaganda junket to Israel. I don't really think that there is a whole lot that a content creator can do in this particular moment in history that it would be worse than anything that tries to spread Israeli propaganda in the midst of this genocide.
One example of which we will get to in a moment.
The more you
Good, we
orbit,
get
the
an
more-
example. I wonder what basic analytical term fucking Loserbox is going to misunderstand this time.
Insane your take.
Yeah, because you radicalize your audience to support the axis of resistance. People who, on top of terrorizing the fuck out of other Arabs more so than any other group, by the way, they are also insanely regressive. They are massively anti-Semitic. They support senseless violence. It doesn't actually improve.
Wait a second. You're going to talk about senseless violence again. You can look at the target. You can look at what they're targeting, and I mean, it really says everything that when Iran counterattacked Israel a couple of weeks ago, Israel came out and said this attack was a failure because none of our civilians died. And because that's their metric for success. I mean, if you're talking about senseless violence in the fucking Middle East right now, the people who are actually trying to keep a lid on the escalation, the people who have been very scrupulous about what kind of targets they hit, well, that hasn't been Israel. That hasn't been the U.S. That has been the resistance axis. They have been actually very selective about what they're hitting. And trying to maintain some sort of limits to escalation because they have no interest in an all-out war, whereas like the U.S. and Israel seem kind of keen on it at this point.
The conditions as anyone that they claim to advocate for, and you glaze them and call them Anne Frank. That's a problem. Yes, that's a problem.
Oh. Yeah, it's a problem because you would really prefer that Israel could do their genocide completely undisturbed.
From the largest streamer on Twitch for politics, yes.
Scared. And you just, I don't know, you just like kind of lose sight of any sort of honesty.
And here's the thing. See, it is possible to say that, see, it's not a matter of endorsing every single thing that any particular actor is involved in. It is a matter of understanding what they're doing. It's a matter of understanding the criteria by which they're acting, of analyzing what they're doing. Now, I mean, Max Ayel actually had a really good discussion on, I think it was Millennials Are Killing Capitalism, and he's written about this extensively as well. Definitely worth checking out. Talking about how a lot of serious analysis of regional actors, particularly in the Middle East, is hampered by the fact that it has to stay in what he calls the denunciation mode. In other words, rather than starting from the question, what are they doing here? Like, what are their actions? What is their role in a particular context? You have to start out by saying, well, obviously I don't get with that lot or whatever. But if we're serious about it, we're going to start from a different place. We're going to look at what they're doing in a particular context, and they're operating in numerous contexts. In the context of the genocide in Palestine, it is really hard to object to what they're doing because they, first of all, I mean, if international law is your guide, I mean, even though at this point international law it basically doesn't exist. I mean, they're dealing with a regime that has never been amenable to legal accountability in its entire history. But they are actually acting fairly consistently with it. Compared, certainly, to the... I'm sorry. I mean, compared to who their adversaries, who have absolutely no standards and no red lines, yeah, I mean, they very clearly compare favorable to them. Now, so, like, if you're going to talk about their role in that context, it is a pretty positive one, because it means that the Palestinians are not alone in this, and that Israel cannot just get away with this with no cost. The fact that Israel is actually running out of armor, the fact that they're actually having difficulty keeping their troop numbers up, is a good thing, and that is entirely down to the coordinated actions of the resistance axis.
Oh.
He just ruined his day saying that, man.
He says, after completely dishonestly representing my positions because of a chatter. Again, you know it's intentional as well, because I guess he's doing this because he knows that I'm more critical of him than he first thought I was. And now, do you remember last year people would tell him that I was a phalangist or whatever the fuck else, and that I supported Sapper Shatila and all this shit, and he was like, I don't know, that's a...
Well, I mean, and at this point, that would actually be an improvement on what you've been supporting this past year, Loserbox.
Like, come on, that's like, this is just telephone, this is bullshit. He dismissed it. He dismissed his chat because I guess he was on better terms with me. But now that I guess he knows that I'm like friendly with Destiny and all the rest of it, it's like...
Oh, yeah, that would actually lower people's opinion of you.
Now we're going to take chat at their word, and now we're going to say, oh, he disagrees with my position on material conditions being the sole cause of...
You don't disagree with his position, though. You don't know what material conditions are. That's not the same thing as disagreeing with the position. You literally do not seem to know what the term means.
Mocking Anne Frank or Helen Keller.
Don't know. Thanks for the $20. But now because he doesn't like my positions as much.
Well, yeah, because your positions suck shit, though.
Now we're just going to say that, oh, you must be defending Asmongold because you disagree with my takes on material conditions and homophobia.
Man. It's not even a crash out type of situation. Like, it's just weird.
So by contrast, let's look at what he actually says when... Because when I accuse Hassan of saying something or holding a position, I'll show you him doing it. So
let's see this. Let's see if it...
Okay.
By the way, just want to point out to LSF, to the LSF crowd, once again, I just saw this. Wonderful stuff. Asmongold and I have a 4-hour conversation. Hassan says the Houthi he talked to is like Anne Frank. First of all, he was not a fucking Houthi. Secondly...
also, that Houthi is the name of the leader of the Ansarullah movement. I don't know why. I mean, I guess I kind of know why the U.S. And like people who are sort of in the U.S. propaganda axis prefer to call them that rather than calling them by their actual name and acknowledging that they are basically the sitting government of Yemen at this point.
To be clear, it is inconclusive whether or not he's actually a Houthi because his social media activity suggests he is, because he's literally told people that he's a soldier when asked.
Which is not the same thing as saying that he's a member of the Ansarullah movement. That just means he's in the Yemeni armed forces.
Among other things. But then when Hassan asked it.
Fuck knows. I know I've been seeing bulletins saying a lot of overseas airlines are canceling their flights into Tel Aviv. There seem to have been a lot of those. I haven't seen anything about flights out of Tel Aviv being canceled, but there certainly have been a lot of people departing. There is all sorts of discussion in like the business press about sort of brain drain and capital flight out of Israel because, I mean, at this point it's interesting because people who've been involved in the BDS campaign, boycott, divestiture, sanctions campaign, have been trying to get people to divest from Israel for a very long time on moral grounds. And now they're getting divested from because it's just a shitty investment.
He just said, oh yeah, I'm just a kid from Yemen. And Hassan actually even said, oh, I think he's media trained with that question, with that answer. So the jury is out on whether or not he's actually a Houthi.
Yeah, I mean, and why is this the most important thing?
So
that reminds me though. I don't remember. I should have taken a picture of it. I was in the supermarket like a week or two ago, and there was this like big display for some food product, some snack food. I don't remember what it was. But the guy's face that was being used to advertise whatever it was, looked so much like that Yemeni sailor that they're talking about. Rashad something. It could have been his twin.
It is completely 100% confirmed that he's a Houthi sympathizer. He supports them. And he makes videos.
Yeah, a lot of people do in Yemen. They're quite popular.
So, okay.
Yes, he withstood genocide. That is correct. Like, you can't fucking materialize a appropriate dwarfy or whatever the fuck this Destiny Dick Rider account is. But 4 hours of conversation.
He's doubling down on comparing the Houthi kid to Anne Frank. Okay.
Well, I haven't heard him actually say that. I mean, it is a weird comparison because, I mean, Anne Frank was not a resistance fighter. She was a, 13-year-old girl who was hiding from the Nazis and wrote a diary about her experiences and her thoughts and everything. I mean, it would be a really weird kind of comparison to be making. I'm not sure where he would be going with that, but I haven't heard him make the comparison is the thing.
Conversation, that's the one thing you got? That's awesome. That is fucking dope, dude. LSF is so insane. Anne Franks was just like Luffy. Is this the really best that Twitch politics has to offer? These two idiots, embarrassing. The guy...
I mean, it actually sounds like he's making fun of that shitty comparison.
Was a part of a terrorist organization who beats women for going to school and execute gay men on a weekly basis, and Hassan invited bombos. Yeah, that guy literally got detained by the fucking Houthis, by the way. Check OP's history. I don't need to check it. But again, 4-hour conversation. 4-hour conversation. Is Destiny still interested in doing World War I research?
It would be really an improvement if he actually showed an interest in doing research rather than just mining shit for talking points.
Little fucking hermits, dude.
Has Hassan ever actually elaborated to any degree on what's happening in Yemen with the Houthis? The Anne Frank comparison is actually so disgusting.
I mean, I haven't heard him actually endorse this comparison, let alone make it. Chat, am I wrong here? Am I missing something? It sounds like he's actually saying it's ridiculous to suggest that that was what he was saying.
Yeah, when you know anything about the Houthis, it is pretty fucking gross to compare a supporter of the Houthis to Anne Frank. Yeah.
Oh my god. Get a life. Get a grip. Get a fucking grip, you animals.
Yeah, I mean, this does not sound like him doubling down on this comparison that we still have not actually heard him make.
Holy shit. Also, everything else is deemed political for LSF. Meanwhile, this is like,
Wow.
This is fine.
Is he really upset that that's the clip that got taken from the stream? Yeah, sorry. If you insert.
Well, but you didn't show. If that's okay, if there's a clip, why didn't you show us that clip? You were just bragging about how when somebody says something and you're going to clown on them for it, you show them saying it. Sorry, but I'm not seeing him saying it. You kind of left out the most important point. And, I mean, I have a feeling because it is just such a silly comparison because, on a number of levels, that he might just be talking about their photogenicity. But I have no idea. I haven't even heard him make the comparison. I don't even know if that's the case. He seems to be...
People are going to post the banger.
Dispute
that. The banger
that.
is you calling them ad for. No one cares about your material analysis of homosexuality, which is just every country that's homophobic is only so because they got bombed by America.
Which is like, if that is what he was saying, you definitely haven't shown us that.
Or Israel, or when they're not bombed by Israel and America, it's because America supports their leaders.
Oh, well, I mean, it supports their leaders is doing a lot of work there. I mean, you're talking about dictatorships that are being propped up by the U.S. and that in many cases would fall apart if the U.S. withdrew that support because they're not popular.
Okay. Don't worry about that.
So fucking annoying. I wonder why the subreddit is dying. Exactly. Like, what do you think? You can put like normal shit that's going on a day-to-day.
Is this guy being paid by the Zionist lobby or its UK equivalent? Adria asks. Okay, I do not know anything about his funding. I do know that he and Density went on a propaganda junket to Israel. And that, as I understand it, that includes being taken around the closed military zone in the Gaza envelope to see the what's left of the scenes of the the battles of October 7th, and hear Israel's version of events, which at this point has completely fallen apart. I don't know if he paid to get there himself. I don't know if somebody paid his way. I have no idea.
Basis on
There are clips on LSF calling out Osmongold as well. Yeah, he doesn't care. He doesn't care.
fucking Twitch. Just if you do this kind of thing, you're gonna turn it back into fucking storefront again, and it.
Wow. I love the Marxist Leninist reasoning. It always comes back to you must be a Nazi if you don't hold my.
Well, I mean, the guy was actually saying a bunch of white supremacist stuff, and
If you think my Houthi glazing is funny. Okay. Has Hassan ever spoken about what the Houthis actually do in Yemen? Like where they came from, what they believe, what their conduct is?
well, I mean, the main thing to know about that is very popular, the Ansarullah movement, which is their actual name, originate as a popular rebellion against a U.S.-imposed dictatorship in Yemen that was so servile to the U.S. that there were times when dissidents got released from prison under Saleh, and Obama said, no, we don't want that guy released, and so they just locked him right up again. I mean, they allowed the U.S. to just carry out terror attacks on Yemeni territory completely unchecked. That is where they come out of.
About the war with Saudi Arabia, about the famine. Have you ever
The famine, motherfucker, it wasn't a famine. I mean, it wasn't a famine. Okay, I should clarify that, because fundamentally all famines in the modern era are to some extent man-made. But he's using the term famine here to act as if it was something agentless, when in fact it was the US and Saudi Arabia systematically cutting off all avenues of sustenance to the poorest country in the Middle East. That's what he's talking about with the famine. It's like what Biden and Harris do when they call the genocide in Gaza the humanitarian crisis, like it's a fucking earthquake.
They talk about any of this. I've only ever heard American Saudi bombs and resistance to Israel.
Yeah. Those are two rather important things. Particularly, I mean, since the U.S. was leading the aggression against Yemen, I mean, if you're in the if you're in the U.S. or if you're in a U.S. client state, I mean, judging from these posters, I'm guessing he's actually in Britain. These posters are posters I've not seen in the U.S., but I have seen them in Britain. But those should be the most important things, because those are things that depend on our governability in order for the U.S. to be able to do.
Just like 1,000 miles away from Yemen, but we've done the history of Yemen once on stream.
Oh, I'm sure you have.
Do a summary. Do you guys want to know?
Yeah, I mean, and that is that has a lot to do with like popular misconceptions about how famines work, because people have this idea that famines in general are the way they were in the Neolithic, basically. Yeah, exactly, in biblical terms. where famines were largely the result of like a bad harvest or bad weather or something like that. Whereas these days, I mean, any famine in the modern era you can think of, it has more to do with distribution systems than it has to do with any specific natural cause. Like the famine in Ireland would not have been a famine, except that Britain was requiring them to export all of the food that could have been eaten. You know, the famine in the DPRK wouldn't have been a famine if they hadn't made some really bad decisions that seemed like good ideas at the time about what land to put under the plow or not, and also if they hadn't lost like their main trading partners because the Soviet Union collapsed. So there are always like artificial aspects to a modern famine wherever you go. Just about everywhere you go, every famine is very much a matter of like policy and food distribution systems, and can people afford food and stuff like that. It's never just a natural phenomenon. But I'm noticing the time. It is time for me to wrap up. Thank you everyone for joining me, and thank you for your good wishes in the Discord. This has actually, I mean, every time I'm feeling shitty and I go on for this evening stream, I end up feeling better afterwards, and that is the case this time too. It was a really shitty day, actually a pretty bad week in general, but this was good, and I hope it was good for you all too. I will be back next week, Friday at 11:30 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time, and we'll see who's on their bullshit then. Until then, for anyone who isn't already in the Discord, I'm going to just drop the link for that. You can join me there. We can keep in touch in between streams. If you see some bullshit you'd like me to react to, you can tell me about it there. And there's also now a channel, thanks to some suggestions from people in the Discord, there's a channel to share your art and stuff like that as well. Well, we'll always have the VOD, Adria. But I will be back next week, barring some new fucking catastrophe. Well, yeah, I'm glad. I hope this was as good for you all as it was for me. Have a good night, and